Maya Brooks had learned early that silence was safer than speaking up. At 17, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that often made adults mistake her for someone much older. She lived in a modest apartment on the edge of Ridgewood with her father, Marcus, whose work kept him away for days at a time. When he was home, he'd sit at their small kitchen table, sipping black coffee and asking about her day with eyes that never quite lost their watchful edge. "How's school treating you, baby girl?" He'd ask every evening when they managed to eat together. "Fine, Dad. Same as always," she'd reply, keeping her voice light. She never told him about the whispers in the hallways or the way certain students looked right through her as if she were invisible. She never mentioned Amber Richardson, the mayor's daughter, who ruled Ridgeway High like it was her personal kingdom. Maya had earned her place at Ridgeway through an academic scholarship, one of only 3 black students in a school of nearly 800. She kept her head down, her grades up, and her dreams locked safely in a worn sketchbook she carried everywhere. Art was her escape, the one place where her hands could speak louder than her voice ever dared. Her father worked security consulting, or so she told her classmates when they bothered to ask. The truth was more complicated, wrapped in secrets he promised to explain when she was older. All Maya knew was that people respected Marcus Brooks wherever he went, and that respect often came with an edge of fear she didn't quite understand. That Thursday morning started like any other. Maya walked through Ridgeway's iron gates at 7:30, backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds playing soft jazz to drown out the noise of privilege around her. She headed straight for the library, her sanctuary before first period. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, painting golden squares across the worn carpet. She settled into her usual corner table, pulled out her sketchbook, and lost herself in charcoal lines. She was working on a portrait from memory, her mother's face, when shadows fell across her page. Maya looked up to find Amber Richardson standing over her, flanked by her boyfriend Ryan Carter, the quarterback whose family owned half the commercial real estate in town. Amber's blonde ponytail was pulled back so tight it looked painful, her lips curved in that particular smile that always meant trouble. "Working hard, scholarship girl?" Amber's voice dripped with false sweetness. "You know, some of us were born to be here. Others just take up space meant for better people." Maya's fingers tightened around her charcoal pencil, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm just drawing, Amber, not bothering anyone." Ryan leaned closer, his cologne overpowering in the quiet library. "That's the problem, isn't it? You think keeping quiet makes you belong." He glanced at Amber, something cruel sparking between them. "But we all know the truth." Part 2. The first strike, the library air turned thick with tension. Maya gathered her things slowly, refusing to let them see her hands shake. But as she reached for her sketchbook, Amber's hand shot out faster, snatching the warm pages before Maya could stop her. "Let's see what's so important," Amber said, flipping through the drawings with theatrical interest. Her eyes landed on the portrait Maya had been working on, the careful rendering of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Who's this?" "Your maid? Your nanny?" "That's my mother," Maya said quietly, her voice barely holding steady. "She passed away when I was 10. For a moment, something flickered across Amber's face, almost like recognition of a boundary crossed. But Ryan laughed, a sharp bark that echoed off the library walls, and whatever hesitation Amber felt vanished. She ripped the page from the sketchbook, the sound of tearing paper like a physical wound. "Oops," Amber said, crumpling the portrait in her fist. "Guess you'll have to draw her again. If you can remember what she looked like." Maya stood frozen, watching her mother's face disappear into a ball of destroyed paper. Something deep inside her chest cracked, but she'd made a promise to her father. Never cause trouble. Never draw attention. Never give them a reason to ask questions about who Marcus Brooks really was or what he'd done before they moved to this town 3 years ago. "Please," Maya whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "Just give it back." Ryan stepped between them, his 6-foot frame blocking her path. "You don't get to make demands here, Brooks. You walk through our neighborhoods, sit in our classrooms, act like you're one of us. But you're not." He leaned in close enough that she could see the cruelty in his blue eyes. "You're just a charity case playing dress-up in a world that doesn't want you." The bell rang for first period, and students began filtering into the hallway. Amber dropped the crumpled paper at Maya's feet and walked away, Ryan following with his arm around her waist. Maya bent down slowly, picking up the ruined portrait with trembling fingers. She tried to smooth out the wrinkles, but the charcoal was smeared beyond recognition, her mother's smile lost forever. Throughout the morning, Maya moved through her classes like a ghost. In AP literature, she stared at the same page of Their Eyes Were Watching God for 40 minutes without reading a single word. In calculus, she solved equations mechanically while her mind replayed the sound of tearing paper over and over. By lunch, she decided to skip the cafeteria entirely, knowing she couldn't face another moment of Amber's triumphant smirks or Ryan's mocking glances. Instead, she found herself in the art room where Mrs. Patterson, one of the few teachers who seemed to actually see her, was setting up for afternoon classes. "Maya," the older woman said, concern crossing her weathered face. "You look upset, honey. What happened?" Maya wanted to tell her everything. About Amber and Ryan, about the constant microaggressions, about feeling like an intruder in a space that should belong to everyone. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped behind years of her father's warnings. "Don't give them ammunition," he'd always said. "The world isn't fair, baby girl, but drawing attention only makes targets bigger." "Nothing, Mrs. Patterson," Maya finally said. "Just a bad morning." The teacher studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "My door's always open, Maya. Remember that." But as Maya left the art room and headed toward her next class, she didn't notice Amber and Ryan watching from across the hallway, their heads bent together in whispered conspiracy. She didn't see the way Amber's eyes gleamed with malicious intent or how Ryan pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. By the time Maya reached her locker, they'd already set their plan in motion. Part 3. The Trap Springs. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Ridgeway High's courtyard, turning the concrete into a griddle that shimmered with heat waves. Maya had just finished 6th period when her phone buzzed with a text from Lily Chun, her only real friend at school. "Meet me at the flagpole. Important. Come now." Maya frowned at the message. Lily usually avoided the courtyard during lunch and after school, when Amber's crew claimed the space like territorial predators. But the text sounded urgent, and Lily had been there for Maya through countless difficult moments. She couldn't ignore a call for help. The courtyard was surprisingly empty when Maya arrived. Just a handful of students scattered near the edges. The flagpole stood in the center, its shadow stretching long across the ground. Maya checked her phone again, but there was no new message. She was about to turn back when someone grabbed her arm from behind. "Going somewhere? Scholarship girl?" Ryan's voice was cold in her ear. Before Maya could react, more hands grabbed her, strong fingers wrapping around her wrists. She tried to pull away, but there were too many of them. Ryan, 2 of his football teammates, and Amber, directing the whole scene like a choreographer of cruelty. "What are you doing?" Maya's voice rose in panic. "Let me go." "Relax," Amber said, pulling a length of rough rope from her designer bag. "We're just teaching you a lesson about knowing your place. Think of it as a cultural education." They forced Maya against the flagpole, wrapping the rope around her wrists and pulling it tight. The coarse fibers bit into her skin immediately, rough enough to draw blood if she struggled. Maya's heart hammered in her chest as she realized what was happening. They were tying her to the flagpole in full view of anyone who might pass by. "This is insane," Maya said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You can't do this. Someone will see." Ryan laughed, holding up his phone. That's exactly the point. We're going live, Brooks. Let's see how many people want to watch a charity case get what she deserves. He tapped his screen, and Maya watched in horror as the view count started climbing. 10 viewers. 20. 50. Students began emerging from buildings, drawn by the commotion. Some looked shocked, others curious, but nobody moved to help. They just pulled out their own phones, adding to the forest of cameras pointed at her humiliation. Smile for your fans, Amber said, positioning herself in frame. Today we're showing what happens when people forget their place at Ridgeway High. This is Maya Brooks, scholarship student who thinks she belongs here just because she got lucky with some test scores. The rope cut deeper as Maya tried to free herself. Her white t-shirt was already soaked with sweat, sticking to her skin. The afternoon sun felt like a physical weight pressing down on her, making it hard to breathe. Around her, the crowd grew larger. She recognized faces from her classes, kids she'd studied with, lab partners who'd seemed friendly enough. Now they just watched, some giggling nervously, others recording with expressions of detached entertainment. Please, Maya said, hating the desperate edge in her voice. This isn't funny. Untie me. Oh, but it is funny, Ryan said, zooming in on her face. Look at her. She actually thought she was one of us. That's hilarious. You people always think rules don't apply to you, Amber added, her voice loud enough to carry to the growing audience. Walking through our neighborhoods like you own them. Taking scholarships that should go to students who actually belong here. Today, we're drawing a line. Maya felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, she lifted her head and looked directly into Ryan's camera. Her father had taught her that dignity couldn't be stolen, only surrendered. What would you do? Maya said quietly, her voice somehow carrying in the sudden hush. If this was your daughter? Part 4. The breaking point, the question hung in the air like smoke, but Amber just laughed harder. Don't try to make this about race, Maya. You just don't fit in. It's that simple. Yeah, Ryan added, stepping closer with his phone still recording. This school is for people with real families, real money, real connections. You're just borrowing space that doesn't belong to you. The words landed like physical blows. Maya felt something inside her crack, the same place that had broken when Amber destroyed her mother's portrait. Around her, the crowd murmured, a low rumble of discomfort mixed with excitement. One of the sophomore boys threw a water bottle that burst at her feet. Splashing her legs with warm liquid dot, the live stream view count climbed past 5,000. Comments scrolled by too fast to read. A mix of encouragement for the bullies and horrified reactions from strangers who couldn't believe what they were witnessing. But nobody in the actual courtyard moved to help. They just watched, paralyzed by the same social hierarchy that had put Maya in this position in the first place. Enough, a voice called from somewhere in the crowd. Mrs. Patterson. The art teacher pushed through the circle of students, her face flushed with anger and exertion. Untie her right now. This is completely unacceptable. But Amber folded her arms, blocking the teacher's path. Actually, Mrs. Patterson, we're handling this our way. Maya started a fight in the library this morning. We're just making sure she understands consequences. That's a lie, Maya said, but her voice was weak, strained by the tightening rope and the weight of humiliation. Is it? Ryan turned his phone toward the teacher. We've got witnesses. Lots of them. And besides, my dad's on the school board. Principal Harris already knows we're addressing the situation. Mrs. Patterson's face went pale. Maya watched the fear creep into her teacher's eyes. The same fear that kept most of the staff from confronting students whose parents held power over their jobs. The teacher looked at Maya with genuine anguish, then at Amber with barely concealed disgust. "This isn't over," Mrs. Patterson said. But she stepped back, pulling out her own phone to make a call. The rope had cut through Maya's skin now. She could feel warm blood trickling down her wrists, sticky and terrifying. Her vision blurred at the edges, whether from the heat or the shock, she couldn't tell. The flagpole against her back felt like the only solid thing in a world that had tilted sideways, revealing its ugliest truths. Amber moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level. "You know what the real problem is, Maya? You're too quiet. You never fight back. That makes you weak, and weak people don't survive in places like this." She reached out and touched one of Maya's bound wrists, her finger coming away red. "Look at that. You're even bleeding quietly." Maya met Amber's eyes, and for just a moment, she saw something there beyond cruelty. She saw fear. Amber Richardson, with all her privilege and power, was afraid of what Maya represented. Afraid that maybe, just maybe, the world was changing into one where scholarships mattered more than surnames. "I'm not weak," Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm just kind. There's a difference." Something shifted in Amber's expression, but before she could respond, a sound cut through the courtyard noise. The low rumble of an engine, powerful and expensive. Everyone turned toward the school gates as a black SUV pulled up, its tinted windows revealing nothing. The vehicle stopped, engine cutting to silence that rippled through the crowd like a wave. The driver's door opened, and a tall man stepped out. Part 5. The Reckoning arrives. Marcus Brooks, moved with the kind of calm that came from years of knowing exactly how dangerous he could be. He wore a gray suit that looked deceptively simple, his tie loosened just enough to suggest he'd left somewhere important in a hurry. But it was his eyes that made the crowd instinctively part as he walked toward the flagpole. Dark, assessing, and absolutely focused on his daughter. "Who did this?" His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried across the silent courtyard with perfect clarity. Nobody answered. The live stream was still running, now capturing the arrival of a man who radiated authority like heat from asphalt. Ryan's phone, which had been held steady for the entire humiliation, began to shake slightly in his hands. "I asked a question," Marcus said, stopping a few feet from the flagpole. "Who tied my daughter to this pole?" "Sir, we were just—" "It was just a prank," Ryan stammered. "We didn't mean anything by it." Marcus turned slowly, his gaze falling on the quarterback like a spotlight. "A prank." He let the word hang there, tasting it. "You think tying a child to a pole in 100-degree heat is a prank?" "Your daughter started it," Amber tried, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. "She's been causing problems at school, and we were just trying to maintain order." "Maintain order," Marcus repeated. He reached into his jacket, a movement that made several students flinch. But when his hand emerged, it was holding a leather badge holder. He flipped it open, revealing credentials that caught the sunlight. "State Organized Crime Task Force. I consult on matters of intimidation, extortion, and abuse of power. So let me ask you again, with my professional expertise. Who thought it was a good idea to torture my daughter?" The whispers started immediately, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. "That's Marcus Brooks." "Holy shit, isn't he the guy who testified against the Moretti family? I heard he used to run the entire East Side before he turned state's witness. My dad said he's the reason half the city council went to prison." Maya lifted her head. Watching her father through tears, she could no longer hold back. She'd known her dad had a complicated past, but the specifics had always been kept just out of reach. Now, watching him face down the same students who tormented her, she began to understand why he'd always told her to stay quiet. "Nobody's moving," Marcus observed. He pulled a pocket knife from his jacket, the blade catching light as he opened it. "So I'll do it myself?" He cut through the rope with quick, efficient movements, catching Maya as she slumped forward. His arms were gentle despite their strength, cradling her like she was still the little girl who cried on his shoulder when her mother died. "It's over, baby," he whispered into her hair. "I've got you." Then he turned back to face the crowd, his daughter safe against his chest. "Principal Harris," he called out, though the principal hadn't yet emerged from the building. "I know you're watching from your office. Get out here, now." The school's main doors burst open, and Principal Harris practically ran into the courtyard, his face slick with sweat and panic. "Mr. Brooks, I can explain. There's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Marcus said softly, "is that you believed your position protected you from consequences. My daughter was assaulted on school grounds while your staff stood by and watched. That video," he gestured to Ryan's phone, "still recording. That live stream has 40,000 viewers now. People from across the country are watching Ridgeway High torture a 17-year-old girl." "Sir, if we could discuss this privately." "No." Marcus's voice cut through the principal's pleading like a knife. "We're going to discuss this very publicly. You're going to call every parent whose child is in this courtyard. You're going to tell them exactly what their kids learned today. And then you're going to explain why you allowed it to happen." Amber found her voice, desperate and shrill. "My father is the mayor. You can't do this to me. He'll have your job." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and Maya felt him take a slow breath. "Your father," he said finally, "will be hearing from me before sunset. And when he does, I'm going to explain exactly what federal civil rights violations look like. Your privilege ends where my daughter's dignity begins." Part 6. The scales tip within 20 minutes. The courtyard had transformed from a scene of casual cruelty into something resembling a crime scene. 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing but sirens silent. The officers who emerged moved with the kind of deference that confirmed what the whispers had already established. Marcus Brooks was not someone they wanted to cross. "Mr. Brooks," the lead officer said, nodding respectfully, "we got your call. The district attorney's office has been notified." Maya watched from her father's side as the officers began taking statements. Students who'd been laughing 10 minutes ago now looked terrified, realizing that their entertainment had become evidence. Their phones were being confiscated one by one, collected as documentation of what the officers were calling assault, false imprisonment, and potential hate crime charges. "Dad, please," Maya whispered. "Don't hurt them." Marcus looked down at his daughter, his expression softening. "Baby girl, I'm not going to hurt anyone. But they need to learn that actions have consequences. Real ones." He turned to the nearest officer. "I want statements from every student who stood here and watched. Every single one." Amber and Ryan were separated, each flanked by an officer taking notes. Amber's confidence had shattered completely. She kept trying to call her father, but the officers had taken her phone as evidence. Ryan just stood with his head down, the reality of his situation slowly sinking in. "This is going to ruin my football scholarship," he said to no one in particular. "State championship, college scouts, everything." "You should have thought about that," Marcus said, his voice devoid of sympathy, "before you decided entertainment was more important than humanity." Principal Harris paced nearby, his phone pressed to his ear as he tried to control the situation spinning beyond his grasp. "Yes, Mayor Richardson, I understand your concerns, but—" "No, sir, we can't just make this go away. There are federal authorities involved now." "Yes, DeMarcus Brooks." Maya felt her wrists throbbing where the rope had cut into her skin. Mrs. Patterson had brought first aid supplies from the nurse's office, carefully cleaning and bandaging the injuries while murmuring apologies. "I should have done more," the teacher kept saying. "I should have stopped them sooner." "It's not your fault," Maya told her, though part of her wondered if that was true. How many teachers had seen the warning signs and looked away? How long had Amber and Ryan been able to operate with impunity because their parents held power? The live stream had been shut down, but the damage was done. The video had already been screen recorded and shared across social media platforms. By the time the officers finished collecting evidence, hashtags were trending. National news outlets were picking up the story. Ridgeway High, the prestigious school that prided itself on excellence, was becoming infamous for all the wrong reasons. Lily Chun finally appeared, pushing through the dispersing crowd with tears streaming down her face. "Maya, I'm so sorry. They took my phone and sent that text. I didn't know what they were planning. I swear I would have warned you." Maya pulled her friend into a hug, careful of her bandaged wrists. "I know. It's okay." But Marcus was less forgiving. He turned to the officers. "I want phone records pulled. If they used another student's device to lure my daughter into a trap, that's premeditation. That changes everything." The lead officer nodded grimly. "Already on it, sir." This is not going to go away quietly. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard, the scope of what had happened started to crystallize. This wasn't just about two students bullying another. It was about a system that had allowed it to happen, that had created an environment where privilege could excuse cruelty. And Marcus Brooks, with his complicated past and his federal connections, was about to dismantle that system piece by piece. "Mr. Brooks," Principal Harris approached cautiously, "perhaps we could discuss a resolution that satisfies everyone. The school board is prepared to offer counseling, community service, maybe a temporary suspension." Marcus looked at the principal like he was something scraped off a shoe. "My daughter was tied to a pole and tortured while your school watched and recorded it for entertainment. You think counseling addresses that? What do you want?" "Justice," Marcus said simply. "Real justice. Not the kind you buy with donations and political connections. The kind that comes from courts and consequences." Part 7. The trial of public opinion. The next 48 hours moved like a nightmare in reverse, where instead of falling into darkness, Maya watched light flood into every corner where cruelty had been hiding. The video from Ryan's live stream had gone viral in the truest sense, shared millions of times across every platform. News trucks lined up outside Ridgeway High. Reporters camped on the school's manicured lawn, interviewing students, teachers, and anyone who would talk about what had happened. Maya stayed home those first 2 days, her father refusing to let her return until he was satisfied she'd be safe. They sat together at the kitchen table, watching news coverage that ranged from sympathetic to outraged. Legal analysts discussed potential charges. Civil rights advocates called for federal investigations. The school board held emergency meetings behind closed doors. "How are you feeling, baby girl?" Marcus asked, watching his daughter stare at her bandaged wrists. "Like everything changed, and nothing changed at the same time," Maya said quietly. "They hurt me because they thought they could get away with it. And if you weren't who you are, they probably would have." Marcus was silent for a moment. "You're right. That's the truth of it. But that's also why I've spent the last 10 years making sure I have the power to protect you. Everything I did, every deal I cut, every testimony I gave, it was all to build a wall between you and the kind of world that thinks your pain doesn't matter. What's going to happen to them? Amber and Ryan are being charged as adults. Assault, false imprisonment, civil rights violations. The district attorney is taking it seriously because of the public pressure." He paused. "The mayor tried to call in favors, but my testimony put too many people in prison. Nobody wants to be seen protecting his daughter after what happened to you." Maya absorbed this information slowly. "I don't want them to go to prison, Dad. I just wanted them to see me as human." "I know," Marcus said gently. "But sometimes people don't learn empathy until they face consequences. That's not on you to fix." The school board met on the third day, a public session that was streamed live. Maya and her father sat in the audience, surrounded by supporters who'd emerged from unexpected places. Mrs. Patterson was there, along with several other teachers who'd submitted formal complaints about the school's handling of bullying. Lily Chun sat beside Maya, holding her hand. Civil rights organizations had sent representatives. And in the back row, quietly observing, sat several parents whose own children had been victims of Amber and Ryan's cruelty, but had been too afraid to speak up. Principal Harris was the first to testify, his career clearly hanging by a thread. "I take full responsibility for the failure of oversight that allowed this incident to occur. We are implementing immediate changes to our bullying prevention protocols and our response procedures." A board member interrupted. "Principal Harris, records show that Maya Brooks' guidance counselor filed 3 separate reports about harassment she was experiencing. Reports that you personally dismissed. How do you explain that?" The principal's face went gray. I believed the students involved when they said it was just typical teenage drama. I made a mistake in judgment." "You made a choice," Marcus said from the audience, his voice carrying despite not being called to speak. "You chose to believe the children of wealthy parents over a scholarship student who had no one to advocate for her. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern." The room erupted in applause. The board president banged her gavel for order, but her expression suggested she agreed with every word. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she walked to the microphone slowly, very aware of the cameras and the eyes watching her. Her bandaged wrists were visible below her sleeves, a silent testimony to what she'd endured. "My name is Maya Brooks," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I came to Ridgeway High 3 years ago on scholarship. I worked hard to be here. I followed every rule. I kept quiet when students made comments about where I came from or how I looked. I told myself that if I just stayed out of the way, eventually they'd accept me." She paused, looking directly at the board members. "But they never planned to accept me, because in their minds, I was taking something that belonged to them just by existing in the same space. And when nobody stopped them from saying it, they started believing they could do more than just say it. What happened to me wasn't about a prank gone wrong. It was about a system that taught some students they're more valuable than others. That taught them their comfort matters more than someone else's safety. And unless that system changes, this will happen again to someone else." The room was completely silent when she finished. Several board members were visibly emotional. One wiped her eyes openly. The board voted that night. Principal Harris was placed on immediate leave pending investigation. Amber Richardson and Ryan Carter were permanently expelled from Ridgeway High. The school committed to mandatory bias training for all staff and students, along with an independent review of disciplinary procedures. Thought it wasn't enough. Maya knew that, but it was a start. Part 8. Rising from the Ashes. 1 month later, Maya stood in front of Ridgeway High again. The morning was cool, autumn beginning to creep into the edges of summer heat. She'd spent the past weeks healing, both physically and emotionally. Her wrists had scarred, thin white lines that would always remind her of what happened. But her father had taught her that scars were just proof of survival, not symbols of shame. "You ready?" Marcus asked from the driver's seat of his SUV. Maya took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Walking through those gates felt different this time. Students watched her approach, but the stares had changed quality. Some looked guilty, ashamed of what they'd witnessed without stopping. Others looked curious, seeing her fully for perhaps the first time. And a few, a small but growing number, nodded respectfully as she passed. The flagpole still stood in the center of the courtyard. The school board had wanted to take it down, to remove the reminder of what had happened there. But Maya had asked them to leave it. "Don't erase it," she'd told them. "Let it stand as a reminder that we can do better." Someone had tied yellow ribbons around the base, dozens of them, each one representing a student's commitment to standing up against bullying. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. Lily Chun met her at the entrance, along with a handful of other students who'd reached out over the past month. "We're with you," Lily said simply. "Whatever you need today." Inside, Maya found her new locker assignment in a better-lit hallway closer to the main office. The administration had made several changes designed to increase supervision and reduce isolated spaces where bullying could flourish. New cameras had been installed. Anonymous reporting systems had been set up. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. Mrs. Patterson caught her between first and second period. "Maya, I wanted you to know. The school board approved funding for a dedicated art scholarship in your mother's name. We're calling it the Grace Brooks Memorial Scholarship for students who demonstrate both artistic talent and resilience in the face of adversity." Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. "Really? Really? Your mother would be proud of you, honey. So proud." At lunch, Maya made her way to the cafeteria, that space that had always felt like a minefield of social politics. But when she entered with her tray, something unexpected happened. Students at several tables waved her over, offering seats, making space. She chose a table with Lily and some other scholarship students, but the gesture itself meant something. The walls were beginning to crack. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. A representative from the State Attorney General's office came to speak with her during her free period. "Miss Brooks, we're pursuing civil rights charges in your case, but we're also launching a broader investigation into discriminatory practices at private schools across the state. Your courage in coming forward has opened doors for a lot of other students who've been suffering in silence." "I didn't do anything courageous," Maya said quietly. "I just survived what happened to me." "Sometimes," the lawyer said gently, "survival is the most courageous thing of all." That evening, Maya sat at her easel in the apartment she shared with her father, a new sketchbook open before her. Her father watched from the kitchen, pretending to read the newspaper, but really just keeping an eye on his daughter the way he always had. "Dad," Maya said without turning around, "thank you for coming that day, for being who you are so you could protect me." Marcus set down his paper. "Baby girl, I'd burn the whole world down before I let anyone hurt you. You know that. I do. But I'm also glad you taught me that there are better ways to fight. That justice is more powerful than revenge." She turned back to her sketch, her hand moving confidently across the page. She was drawing the flagpole, but in her rendering, it was surrounded by people holding hands, a circle of solidarity where once there had been a circle of cruelty. At the top, where the flag would normally fly, she drew a banner with simple words, "We are all worthy." As the sun set over Ridgeway, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Maya Brooks continued to draw. She drew because art was her voice, but also because she'd learned something crucial in the past month. The world wasn't automatically fair. Justice didn't just happen. Change required people willing to stand up, to speak out, to refuse to accept cruelty as normal. She'd been tied to a pole and humiliated in front of thousands. But she'd also discovered her own strength, found allies in unexpected places, and started a conversation that would outlast her time at Ridgeway High. That live stream, meant to degrade her, had instead exposed the rot in a system that had gone unchallenged for too long. Amber Richardson and Ryan Carter were facing criminal charges, their futures uncertain in ways they'd never imagined possible. Principal Harris had been formally dismissed. The school board had been forced to reckon with its own failures. And across the state, other students were beginning to speak up about their own experiences. Emboldened by Maya's example, it wasn't the ending Maya would have chosen. She still had nightmares sometimes about being tied to that pole, about the rope cutting into her wrists, about the sound of laughter while she suffered. But she also had something else now, Proof that her voice mattered, that her dignity was non-negotiable, and that even in the darkest moments, there was always a path forward. You know what I learned, Dad? Maya said, setting down her charcoal. You can't teach respect through fear, but you can make people remember why kindness matters, why every person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Marcus came to stand behind her, looking at the drawing taking shape on her easel. Your mother used to say something similar. She'd say that the measure of a society is how it treats those with the least power. I think she'd be proud of the woman you're becoming. Maya smiled, adding one final detail to her sketch. A girl standing in the center of the circle, head held high, wrists marked but hands free. I hope so. I really hope so. Outside, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Ridgeway High sat quiet in the distance, its halls empty but no longer quite the same as they had been. Change was slow and justice imperfect, but seeds had been planted. And Maya Brooks, the quiet scholarship student who'd once believed silence was safety, had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply refuse to be erased. She'd been tied to a pole, but she would not be defined by it. She was more than what had been done to her. She was an artist, a daughter, a friend, a survivor, and a voice for those who hadn't yet found their own. And as she walked toward the doors of her apartment building, ready to face another day, she carried that truth with her like armor. The world hadn't changed overnight, but it had changed. And that was enough to keep moving forward, one step, one day, one small act of courage at a time. The end.